Welcome to this webinar on a guide to material selection. I have the pleasure of introducing Professor Nils Roar Gjerde, who is affiliated to NIOM but also working at the University of Bergen.
Today's topic is about some of the formalities associated with the regulation and selection of dental materials. The market for dental products is surprisingly large, as seen from this biannual International Dental Fair in Cologne, reflecting that dentistry is intensive with regard to materials and devices. In the EU, medical devices, which is a very broad term, include all dental materials and devices that are used on people, patients or non-patients. The new EU regulation will be in full effect in 2022. It will represent a tightening of several of the requirements compared with the previous directives. For example, stricter requirements regarding clinical evaluation. The essential requirements are important for the CE marking. The CE mark is a visual sign of compliance with the regulation just mentioned. So the CE mark is basically a trade passport to ensure that there's free movement of goods within the EU, one of the 4 freedoms in the EU. The essential requirements in the directives have to be fulfilled, and this regulatory process is the responsibility of the manufacturer. It should be mentioned that it's illegal, actually, to place on the market non-CE marked products in EU countries. Not all medical devices are equal, so the EU regulation divides them in 3 classes, actually 4, but class 1, for example, is the familiar everyday products, say short-term use, instruments and so on, and also could include gingival retraction materials. They are short-term exposure products and considered to be of low risk. The main group of products are the medium risk products, class 2, A and B, for example the filling materials and the prosthodontic materials. Materials for dental implants and sutures are termed invasive, and they are termed class 2B, but they're still in the class 2 division. Class 3, as far as I know, there is no dental product in this group. There's a high-risk products, for example, hip prosthesis and cardiac stents. The product chain, as we call it, starts with the manufacturer. And the manufacturers are the ones we are familiar with. Some are mentioned here. And there is a merging going on in the industry, so they change names occasionally. And they, of course, make products, specific product, and that could also be made by a subcontractor, so-called OBL products, own brand label products that are made outside the manufacturer's facilities. But the manufacturer is still responsible. The product has to be CE marked to be placed on the market. That's the responsibility of the manufacturer, whether it's an OBL manufacturer or not. This goes to the distributor or dealer, which we also are familiar with, the dental depots, for example, and it goes to us. And to the patient, of course. The dental laboratories, they are manufacturers in the legal sense of the word, and they do not need to CE mark the specific products made for single patients. Still, they are manufacturers, but they are exempt from CE marking. The manufacturer, which in the EU has this pictogram, as we see here, see an example of, they are legally responsible for the safety and performance of the product. I should mention that it's provided that handling application is according to directions for use. They should also keep records on feedback, adverse events, etc. The same formalities applied if the physical products are made by a subcontractor, so-called OBL products. Dental laboratories, a few words about those. They are said they are manufacturers in the legal sense. They make custom-made devices that are exempt from CE marking. But a statement should accompany the product for the specific patient. Also, the lab should have a quality system for the production processes according to the EU regulations. If you think like a manufacturer, we would like to make a new product to be placed on the market. One of the first things to do then is to subject the product or the potential product to preclinical testing to evaluate basic properties such as strength, bond strength, etc. Moreover, we will have to assess the clinical performance and safety of the product, so-called clinical evaluation. It should be noted that it's not necessary for the manufacturer to do actual clinical trials with the specific product. It could be sufficient to claim substantial equivalence with an existing product. If that's found okay by the unit providing the CE mark, then it can be placed on the market and it will be available to us as operators. And if unusual behavior or events occur, then that response should go to the manufacturer, should go back to the manufacturer, closing the feedback loop that could set the manufacturer in position to improve the products. So that's the principle behind this reporting system. If it's serious events, serious threat to health of the patient, for example, then it should be reported to the medicinal authorities as well, typically, Legemiddelverk and so on. And in some countries, for example, Norway, there's a national reporting procedure, bivirkningsgruppen, in case of biological reactions. Product marking and labeling is important. Here we have an example, an laboratory product from the company GC. It's a Japanese company. This is a composite product. If you look closely at the packaging, we'll see that this product is made in Japan. But it has a European representative, which occurs here on this label. See the pictogram. And this manufacturer is now represented in Belgium for the European market. And you see the CE mark, and the number behind the CE mark denotes the institution that has given the permission to use the CE mark. This is not an OBL product because it's actually made by GC themselves, but they need to have a representative in Europe. Also on the packaging you will see these numbers and barcodes, and the most important here is the lot number or batch number, which shows the actual production batch of that product, that specific product, and that's important in communication with the manufacturer. Directions for use, DFU, they are actually a part of the product. As the saying goes, if everything fails, read the instructions. Even if the print is so small that you actually need a magnifier to read it, but it's still very important to follow and stick to the instructions for use. Otherwise, the manufacturer can say that it's not our responsibility if something happens. So it's a good idea actually to go through the DFU in the whole clinical team. A few words about the American system, because it's often referred to. That's the US Food and Drug Administration. They have a system that's very similar to the EU system, but it's not equivalent. And also, you should note that the same product could have different names in Europe and outside Europe. Unfortunately, there are a few cases of counterfeit products. That's where products are offered to dentists and seemingly coming from an established manufacturer, and even the CE mark could have been faked. We do not know the extent of this activity. Most likely it will happen if you buy from, say, eBay or Alibaba, but we do not now know how frequent this is. It's most likely to involve small items, small expensive items, such as endodontic files, brackets, and implant components. For example, here the company Dentsply have issued a warning regarding counterfeit pro-tape endodontic files some years ago. I would like to say that we are dependent on the manufacturers. They are our friends, so to say, and without them, dentistry would have been different. The established manufacturers, they have a good in-house pre-market evaluation, for example, in the form of laboratories, and systems to assess post-market information. And the manufacturer are obliged to maintain a quality system that ensures performance as stated. On the other hand, our responsibility is to handle the materials according to indications and directions for use, as mentioned earlier. Feedback to manufacturers is important, and we can report via the dealer or distributor, the depots, but you could also report directly to the manufacturer. And feedback forms, they could be very hard to find, unfortunately. Below you see 3 forms from major manufacturers that are somewhat hidden in the web pages from those manufacturers, but they do have it. And the manufacturers, if you send in a report on some event or behavior you would like to comment on, they should report back to you. And it's mandatory for the manufacturers to maintain a system to collect such responses in order to close the feedback loop I mentioned earlier. A crucial question is, should I start using a new product if I already have one that's functioning reasonably well? As you all know, there's a substantial commercial pressure to introduce new products to dentistry. But you should examine critically all the information provided by the manufacturer. However, there is room for improvement in the quality of promotional material, as we have demonstrated in a recent upcoming paper in the Norwegian Dental Journal. And the crucial question is, will the new product add value to my clinical work? How should you do that? One way of doing it is to screen the literature databases, for example, PubMed. It's freely available still. Look for published results, particularly on clinical performance, usually, but that usually come very late, years after introduction, and the actual product could be obsolete. Sometimes it appears that products are placed on the market too early. It's a recent example. For example, this product, bioactive product, that is called, the fillings, they fell out after 1 year because the manufacturer did not recommend the bonding procedure. The new directions for use include bonding procedures which hopefully will improve the performance of the material. Compliance with standards could be useful in evaluation. And standards, they are specification about the definitions and properties of several types of materials and devices. But they are voluntary to use for the manufacturers in, for example, marketing. But you could request them. Compliance with the standards, they will at least ensure some minimum properties if there are existing standards on the specific products. Here you see one standard, typical one. It's a dentistry called polymer-based restorative materials. That includes the composite filling materials, for example. And they have a set of requirements, for example, strength, as you see being tested here in a 3-point bending test. So if you require compliance with standards, you will be on the safer side regarding material selection. Should you be in the position to be responsible for procurement of materials and services, you should always consider reasons why to switch products. You should also include specific requirements in tenders, for example, and add to the tender specification, request compliance with standards, as mentioned. You could require clinical documentation about the materials and require specific information regarding procedures in the dental lab, if that's relevant. For example, documentation on CAD/CAM systems and so on. NIOM could be of assistance in such processes, so that's the advertisement for NIOM for now. Thank you for your attention.